Section 38 of The Dream of the Red Chamber, Book 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Elizabeth Buchanan. The Dream of the Red Chamber, Book 1, by Cao Xueqin. Translated by Henry Bencraft Joly. Chapter 17, Part 2. Speedily the whole company penetrated inside, perceiving, as soon as they had entered the gate, a zigzag arcade, below the steps of which was a raised pathway, laid promiscuously with stones, and on the furthest part stood a diminutive cottage with 3 rooms, 2 with doors leading into them, and 1 without. Everything in the interior, in the shape of beds, teapoys, chairs and tables, were made to harmonize with the space available. Leading out of the inner room of the cottage was a small door from which, as the egress, they found a back court with lofty pear trees in blossom, and banana trees, as well as 2 very small retiring back courts. At the foot of the wall unexpectedly became visible an aperture, where was a spring, for which a channel had been opened scarcely a foot or so wide, to enable it to run inside the wall. Winding round the steps, it skirted the buildings until it reached the front court, where it coiled and curved, flowing out under the bamboos. "This spot," observed Chia Cheng, full of smiles, "is indeed pleasant, and could one, on a moonlight night, sit under the window and study, one would not spend a whole lifetime in vain." As he said this, he quickly cast a glance at Pao yü, and so terrified did Pao yü feel that he hastily drooped his head. The whole company lost no time in choosing some irrelevant talk to turn the conversation, and 2 of the visitors prosecuted their remarks by adding that on the tablet in this spot 4 characters should be inscribed. "Which 4 characters?" Chia Cheng inquired laughingly. "The bequeathed aspect of the river Chi," suggested one of them. "It's commonplace," observed Chia Cheng. Another person recommended, "The remaining vestiges of the Chu garden." "This too is commonplace," replied Chia Cheng. "Let brother Pao yü again propound one," interposed Chia Chen, who stood by. "Before he composes any himself," Chia Cheng continued, "his wont is first to discuss the pros and cons of those of others, so it's evident that he's an impudent fellow." "He's most reasonable in his arguments," all the visitors protested, "and why should he be called to task?" "Don't humour him so much," Chia Cheng expostulated. "I'll put up for to day," he however felt constrained to tell Pao yü, "with your haughty manner and your rubbishy speech, so that after you have, to begin with, given us your opinion, you may next compose a device. But tell me, are there any that will do among the mottos suggested just now by all the gentlemen?" "They all seem to me unsuitable," Pao yü did not hesitate to say by way of reply to this question. Chia Cheng gave a sardonic smile. "How all unsuitable?" he exclaimed. "This," continued Pao yü, "is the first spot which her highness will honour on her way, and there should be inscribed, so that it should be appropriate, something commending her sacred majesty. But if a tablet with 4 characters has to be used, there are likewise devices ready at hand, written by poets of old, and what need is there to compose any more?" "Are forsooth the devices 'the river Chi' and 'the Chu garden' not those of old authors?" insinuated Chia Cheng. "They are too stiff," replied Pao yü. "Would not the 4 characters, 'a phoenix comes with dignified air,' be better?" With clamorous unanimity, the whole party shouted, "Excellent!" and Chia Cheng, nodding his head, "You beast! You beast!" he ejaculated. "It may well be said about you that you see through a thin tube, and have no more judgment than an insect. Compose another stanza," he consequently bade him, and Pao yü recited: "In the precious tripod kettle, tea is brewed, but green is still the smoke. O'er is the game of chess by the still window, but the fingers are yet cold." Chia Cheng shook his head. "Neither does this seem to me good," he said; and having concluded this remark, he was leading the company out, when just as he was about to proceed, he suddenly bethought himself of something. "The several courts and buildings, and the teapoys, sideboards, tables and chairs," he added, "may be said to be provided for; but there are still all those curtains, screens and portieres, as well as the furniture, knickknacks and curios; and have they too all been matched to suit the requirements of each place?" "Of the things that have to be placed about," Chia Chen explained, "a good number have, at an early period, been added; and of course when the time comes, everything will be suitably arranged. As for the curtains, screens and portieres, which have to be hung up, I heard yesterday brother Lien say that they are not as yet complete; that when the works were first taken in hand, the plan of each place was drawn, the measurements accurately calculated, and some one despatched to attend to the things, and that he thought that yesterday half of them were bound to come in." Chia Cheng, upon hearing this explanation, readily remembered that with all these concerns, Chia Chen had nothing to do, so that he speedily sent some one to go and call Chia Lien. Having arrived in a short while, "How many sorts of things are there in all?" Chia Cheng inquired of him. "Of these, how many kinds have by this time been got ready, and how many more are short?" At this question, Chia Lien hastily produced from the flaps of his boot a paper pocket book, containing a list, which he kept inside the tops of his boot. After perusing it and reperusing it, he made suitable reply. "Of the 120 curtains," he proceeded, "of stiff spotted silks, embroidered with dragons in relief, and of the curtains large and small, of every kind of damask silk, 80 were got yesterday, so that there still remain 40 of them to come. The 2 portieres were both received yesterday, and besides these, there are 200 red woollen portieres, 200 portieres of Hsiang Fei bamboo, 200 door screens of rattan with gold streaks and of red lacquered bamboo, 200 portieres of black lacquered rattan, 200 door screens of variegated thread netting with clusters of flowers. Of each of these kinds, half have come in, but the whole lot of them will be complete no later than autumn. Antimacassars, tablecloths, flounces for the beds, and cushions for the stools, there are 1,200 of each, but these likewise are ready and at hand." As he spoke, they proceeded outwards, but suddenly they perceived a hill extending obliquely in such a way as to intercept the passage, and as they wound round the curve of the hill, faintly came to view a line of yellow mud walls, the whole length of which was covered with paddy stalks, for the sake of protection, and there were several hundreds of apricot trees in bloom, which presented the appearance of being fire, spurted from the mouth, or russet clouds rising in the air. Inside this enclosure stood several thatched cottages. Outside grew, on the other hand, mulberry trees, elms, mallows and silkworm oaks, whose tender shoots and new twigs of every hue were allowed to bend and to intertwine in such a way as to form 2 rows of green fence. Beyond this fence and below the white mound was a well, by the side of which stood a well sweep, windlass and such like articles, the ground further down being divided into parcels and apportioned into fields, which, with the fine vegetables and cabbages in flower, presented at the first glance the aspect of being illimitable. "This is," Chia Cheng observed chuckling, "the place really imbued with a certain amount of the right principle, and laid out, though it has been by human labour, yet when it strikes my eye, it so moves my heart that it cannot help arousing in me the wish to return to my native place and become a farmer. But let us enter and rest a while." As he concluded these words, they were on the point of walking in, when they unexpectedly discerned a stone outside the trellis gate by the roadside, which had also been left as a place on which to inscribe a motto. "Were a tablet," argued the whole company smilingly, "put up high in a spot like this, to be filled by and by, the rustic aspect of a farm would, in that case, be completely done away with, and it would be better, yea far better, to erect this slab on the ground, as it will further make manifest many points of beauty. But unless a motto could be composed of the same excellence as that in Fan Xie Hu's song on the farms, it will not be adequate to express its charms."
"Gentlemen," observed Chia Cheng, "please suggest something."
"A short while back," replied the whole company, "your son, venerable brother, remarked that devising a new motto was not equal to quoting an old one; and as sites of this kind have been already exhausted by writers of days of old, wouldn't it be as well that we should straightway call it the Apricot Blossom Village, and this will do splendidly?" When Chia Cheng heard this remark, he smiled and said, addressing himself to Chia Chen,
"This just reminds me that although this place is perfect in every respect, there's still one thing wanting in the shape of a wine board, and you had better then have one made to morrow on the very same pattern as those used outside in villages, and it needn't be anything gaudy, but hung above the top of a tree by means of bamboos."
Chia Chen assented. "There's no necessity," he went on to explain, "to keep any other birds in here, but only to rear a few geese, ducks, fowls and such like, as in that case they will be in perfect keeping with the place."
"A splendid idea!"
Chia Cheng rejoined, along with all the party.
"Apricot Blossom Village is really first rate,"
continued Chia Cheng, as he again addressed himself to the company,
"but the only thing is that it encroaches on the real designation of the village, and it will be as well to wait until Her Highness comes, when we can request her to give it a name."
"Certainly," answered the visitors with one voice. "But now, as far as a name goes, for mere form, let us all consider what expressions will be suitable to employ." Pao yü did not however give them time to think, nor did he wait for Chia Cheng's permission, but suggested there and then: "In old poetical works there's this passage: 'At the top of the red apricot tree hangs the flag of an inn.' Wouldn't it be advisable, on this occasion, to temporarily adopt the 4 words: 'The sign on the apricot tree is visible'?" "Is visible is excellent," suggested the whole number of them, "and what's more, it secretly accords with the meaning implied by Apricot Blossom Village. Were the 2 words apricot blossom used for the name of the village, they would be too commonplace and unsuitable," added Pao yü with a sardonic grin. "But there's another passage in the works of a poet of the Tang era: 'By the wooden gate near the water, the cornflower emits its fragrance,' and why not make use of the motto 'Corn Fragrance Village,' which will be excellent." When the company heard his proposal, they, with still greater vigour, unanimously combined in crying out "Capital!" as they clapped their hands. Chia Cheng, with one shout, interrupted their cries.
"You ignorant child of wrath!" he ejaculated. "How many old writers can you know, and how many stanzas of ancient poetical works can you remember, that you will have the boldness to show off in the presence of all these experienced gentlemen? In allowing you to give vent to all the nonsense you uttered, my object was no other than to see whether your brain was clear or muddled, and all for fun's sake, that's all, and lo, you've taken things in real earnest."
Saying this, he led the company into the interior of the hall with the mallows. The windows were pasted with paper, and the bedsteads made of wood, and all appearance of finery had been expunged, and Chia Cheng's heart was naturally much gratified. But nevertheless, scowling angrily at Pao yü,
"What do you think of this place?"
he asked. When the party heard this question, they all hastened to stealthily give a nudge to Pao yü, with the express purpose of inducing him to say it was nice. But Pao yü gave no ear to what they all urged. "It's by far below the spot," he readily replied, "designated 'A phoenix comes with dignified air.'"
"You ignorant stupid thing!"
exclaimed Chia Cheng at these words.
"What you simply fancy as exquisite, with that despicable reliance of yours upon luxury and display, are 2-storied buildings and painted pillars. But how can you know anything about this aspect so pure and unobtrusive? And this is all because of that failing of not studying your books."
"Sir," hastily answered Pao yü, "your injunctions are certainly correct, but men of old have often made allusion to 'natural,' and what is, I wonder, the import of these two characters?" The company had perceived what a perverse mind Pao yü possessed, and they one and all were much surprised that he should be so silly beyond the possibility of any change; and when now they heard the question he asked about the two characters representing 'natural,' they, with one accord, speedily remarked: "Everything else you understand, and how is it, on the contrary, you don't know what 'natural' implies? The word 'natural' means effected by heaven itself, and not made by human labour." "Well, just so," rejoined Pao yü, "but the farm, which is laid out in this locality, is distinctly the handiwork of human labour. In the distance there are no neighbouring hamlets; near it adjoin no wastes; though it bears a hill, the hill is destitute of streaks; though it be close to water, this water has no spring; above, there is no pagoda nestling in a temple; below, there is no bridge leading to a market; it rises abrupt and solitary, and presents no grand sight. The palm would seem to be carried by the former spot, which is imbued with the natural principle, and possesses the charms of nature; for though bamboos have been planted in it, and streams introduced, they nevertheless do no violence to the works executed. 'A natural landscape,' says an ancient author in four words, and why? Simply because he apprehended that what was not land would, by forcible ways, be converted into land, and that what was no hill would, by unnatural means, be raised into a hill. And ingenious though these works might be in 101 ways, they cannot, after all, be in harmony." But he had no time to conclude, as Chia Cheng flew into a rage. "Drive him off!" he shouted; but as Pao yü was on the point of going out, he again cried out: "Come back! Make up," he added, "another couplet, and if it isn't clear, I'll for all this give you a slap on your mouth." Pao yü had no alternative but to recite as follows: "A spot in which the Ko fibre to bleach, as the fresh tide doth swell the waters green; a beauteous halo and a fragrant smell the man encompass who the cress did pluck." Section 38.